Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Owolabi podcast. Man, it is good to see you here. I'm excited today because we are live at the Branches Summit, and I'm here with my good friend, Mark Beebe. Mark, actually, literally, you just got off stage at the Branches Summit like a few minutes ago.
Yes.
You're still fresh?
I'm good.
Big applause. Great talk. Well done. The talk today between Mark and you and I are really going to be about this idea of integrating our faith in our business. Now, for those of you who are Christians and would say that you're faith-filled, this is going to be a really helpful conversation because Mark has some unique stories about how it's worked in the real world. It's not just pie in the sky, but it's a long, sustained effort over time that you've seen create incredible results on the back end. So we're going to talk about all of that. And then we're going to kind of unpack your talk. It was a great one. And I think people really want to know the details behind why you picked it and that kind of stuff. So
great.
You ready to go?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So you and I have spent a decent amount of time this last year in different locations. In fact, I've been at your organization and kind of seen how it works from the inside out. Why don't you give people kind of a sort of an overview of who you are, what you do, and what enterprise stewardship does? And you can talk about Seat King too, but give us an overview.
Yeah. So over the last 10 years, I've been blessed to work with different organizations who are really pioneering in the faith and work space. And so peer group organizations, as well as what we're doing now with enterprise stewardship with a faith-based operating system. But everyone's trying to figure out the how. Like there's been this big paradigm shift over the last several years where there's growing momentum of faith-driven leaders wanting to honor God with their business.
Right.
But everyone's looking for, well, how do we actually do that?
Right.
And so there's a bunch of different avenues to that. What we currently are working on with enterprise stewardship is kind of an extension or born out of a company called Capital 3 that's existed for the last 40 plus years, really trying to understand how do we create economic, social, and spiritual capital. When we use that word capital on purpose, a lot of people, when they hear it, they think, oh, are you an investment company? You're just trying to invest it, because capital and
buy companies, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But really, we use capital because it's defined as excess wealth that we're willing to put at risk. So when we work with organizations trying to create economic capital, that means we're going to create a generous economic engine that, yes, is profitable, and then saying, what do we do with the excess? How can we bless our people? How can we bless our communities? How can we bless others around us? Socially, what does that look like? How do we be? How do we take risks with who we spend time with, how we spend our time, how we invest in our employees, right? So we have these excess relationships that are beyond what we maybe individually need as business leaders or owners, but are we willing to put that at risk to serve people?
That's good.
And then spiritually, I think everyone listening to this most likely, and us in this room, know Jesus, but how many of us are sharing Jesus and taking that risk with people to say, it's both deed and word, where we're going to take that risk with people and actually spread the gospel and share Jesus. And so we help organizations think through that in a very intentional way and connect it with a how. It's not just an idea. It's not just a good thought, but how do we actually make that a reality?
I would agree. And I think one of the things I loved about working with you guys this last year with our Branches Institute is this idea that you guys are really focused on effectiveness. It's not about lip service and just saying, hey, we're doing it. And no, you want to see real results and you're trying to measure it as best you possibly can.
That's right.
Which I love. So talk a little bit about your talk. Why did you think about this talk specifically for this stage in this audience? Tell me what made you decide to pick that topic.
Yeah, well, again, we talk about these common ideas a lot, and to really pack in all the how and all the system pieces can be difficult, but really want to hit on the three most important components, which is, number one, if you're going to have a transformed or a flourishing business, you better be a transformed or flourishing leader. I've made a lot of mistakes in my past where trying to outpace business success further than personal or character success. And it's just, there's too many consequences with that. And so starting with the leader itself is so important. And then two, really looking at what is work as worship. I actually, just in the last year, had someone really help reframe that for me. And I think generally we all agree it's doing things with excellence. It's having the right priorities. But there's two questions that have really stood out to me in that process. One is, am I willing to go to work every single day to make my boss look really good.
Hmm.
Because I want to go to work to make me look really good.
Right. Yeah.
But for business owners, who's your boss? You may have a board, but it's our Father in heaven that we can all say, that's who we want to reflect. That's who we want to make look good.
Yeah. Good.
And if we're going to make him look good, then am I willing to go to work and care about the things that he cares about? And yeah, we care about profitability and sustainability of a business. But I think he cares a lot more about our profits and the money we're making, and it goes well beyond into the people that we get to steward.
That's good. It's really good.
So that's two. And then what are some just fundamental, hopefully we were able to leave people with a few practical steps in terms of how do you take those two things and then create a flourishing business.
I love that.
As a result.
It's good. So tell me something, as you're thinking about the talk that you gave and you're thinking about what you want to leave people with, one of the things that I pulled from it was this idea that longevity matters.
Yeah.
Like compound interest matters. Like Eugene Peterson uses the phrase long obedience in the same direction. You didn't say that, but that's the sense that I got as you were talking. Can you talk a little bit about the value of sticking with it over a long period of time? And then tell us again that story you told about Naaman, which was just a really great take on longevity and focus.
Yeah, well, we say a lot, think long, act now. We want success now. That's our culture. That's what I want. I want higher revenues today.
Yeah.
I want better profits tomorrow. It's instant. It's a microwave culture.
Definitely. Currently today, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But even economically, we understand this idea of compounding interest really well. I mean, every business person you talk to, as I was younger, every adult I talked to said, start investing now because there's this idea of compound interest. And when you're ready to retire, then you'll have this money but we don't think about it in other elements of our lives as much. And so we really think of social capital and spiritual capital. We think it can compound at the same or greater rate than our economic dollars. And so we want to think long term. What would it look like if we just started heading in the direction with our businesses, say, what does it look like to honor God in our day-to-day operations? If we did that day in and day out, if we showed up to work to make our Father in heaven look good, if we care about the things he cares about, that does not mean you're going to start seeing salvations in your business tomorrow. But 30 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, if you're living on these principles, I think people would be very, very surprised at the kind of impact that they can have. And so Capital 3, the company that we introduced just a minute ago, they went through that process where their founder and chairman, Pete, he was ready to transition the business to his son, Austin. And so they went through that process, and it was difficult, I think, for both of them in different ways. And through that, they saw some economic dip at first. But over time, just sticking with those same principles that they built the business. Now the thing is, it's booming like ever before.
That's good.
And I think Pete can look at it and even say, oh, I don't think I ever would have gotten here. But through that long-term thinking, long-term investment, you see that.
Patience.
And the story of Naaman, it's just been one of my favorites for a long time. But it's this idea that you have a Syrian warrior who works for the king, has a servant girl from Israel in his house who actually serves his wife, and he ends up getting leprosy. And it was the servant girl who says, you need to go to Israel because my God in Israel can heal you. And so he had the humility to listen to this servant girl, and he goes, and there's a lot of twists and turns in that, but basically the prophet Elisha tells him, you need to go dip in the Jordan River 7 times. And so he doesn't want to.
He's frustrated.
I got better rivers in Syria than you have here. Why did I come all this way? And the people around him asked him a key question. They said, I think if he would have given you a big task to do, would you not have done it? But the simple action that he's given you, you think you're too good for it. And so he says, fine. And you kind of picture him begrudgingly getting in the river.
Same. Yeah.
And taking the first dip, and that didn't work. Yeah. And second dip, that didn't work. Third dip, still nothing. Yeah, fourth. Right. And then, of course, on the 7th dip, as Elisha told him, he comes up and he's cleansed. And so I've been hung up on this idea that how many of us are stopping at dip 2 or dip 4 or dip 6. And obviously it's metaphorical now, and not everything takes 7 attempts. But if we're being obedient, if we're actually listening and saying, God, what do you have for me? Then we're faithful to do it. Then why would we stop at a third dip when we're being obedient to what he has for us?
So good. It makes you wonder about why 7,
Right.
because you have to go through 1 through 6, and it breaks your spirit.
Yeah.
Breaks your pride along the way to get to 7.
That's right.
Which is good. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. The reason why that story resonated with me so much is because Branches as an organization has this long-term sort of 30-year vision with all the organizations we work with, almost believing that like in 30 years, something will happen that you won't be able to see in 10 years.
That's right.
And so you've got to stick with it long enough to see the results. The longevity and the patience is part of the process.
Yep.
That's part of the ingredients. So yeah, I like that a lot. That really resonated. One of the things I love about you and Enterprise Stewardship is that you, again, sort of push for results, and you really try to give people clear frameworks so they can measure results over time. You did a good job, I thought, on stage, kind of showing the actual results of the work that you've done. And one of the things that I think you illustrated well is the work that you've done in a prison. And a lot of people don't know this story. Why don't you give maybe a little bit of context behind the prison, what's happened, and why it took so long?
Yeah, well, I should clarify. I have not done the work in the prison.
Okay, you've never been to prison.
It's a wonderful case study that is. We've launched this coaching company that we were born out of the work that they have done and that they are still doing there. But I would be very careful to say I did not start a company inside the prison. I get to be a great ambassador for that. But yeah, it started as a labor shortage issue where Pete had purchased a company and they had started to grow, but they didn't have the labor. It was in a small town in Kansas, and someone recommended an inmate work release program. They have a medium security and a maximum security prison right there in town. So he said, yeah, let's try it, and it worked out really well. We thought, hey, this is great. They bring them to us, they take them back. We don't have to worry about it. Let's do that. But something happened where they said, hey, we can no longer support it, but we do have an opportunity for you. If you would be willing to move your manufacturing plant inside the prison walls, then you can have all the inmate workers that you want.
All the labor you want.
And so that was a real solution to a real problem that they were having. And, I think they'd be the first to tell you it did not start with all these altruistic motives of, wow, we can do work and be a redemptive place for inmates. It was like, hey, we can have good, hard labor. We can work them tough for the sins that they've committed. They're always going to be in uniform. They're always going to show up on time. What's not to like about this?
Right. They're not going anywhere.
Exactly. But over time, it didn't take very long before they realized the humanity of it, and you started to see people. And really, the biggest difference between us and them is they got caught in their worst moment, and we didn't. And I think a lot of us, while our worst moments may not land us in prison, we certainly don't want them for the world to see and on big screens and things like that. And so they started to really understand, whoa, okay, stewardship is much bigger than economics and profitability. So how do we start building into these folks? And so today there's 2 organizations. One is Seat King, which is in a maximum security prison, and one is called Electrics, which is in a medium security prison.
And just to give some clarity, excuse me. Just to give some clarity around that, if you've ever been on a mower, that is a zero-turn mower, and it has a big plush seat, it's made by Seat King. And because you guys go B2B, oftentimes, the general public doesn't see it.
That's right.
But if you've been on zero-turn mower and felt that comfortable big old seat, you felt the quality of their work.
Absolutely. So yeah, today they produce hundreds of thousands of seats a year.
It's like 90% of the market, right?
I did not know they made that many lawnmowers a year, but they do. And so they're doing a phenomenal job, and it's built on their principles of we honor God, we serve people, we do everything with excellence, and we're going to steward our capital. And so it's gone well beyond, hey, these are things on a wall. But now the inmates who are there, they really understand and embody these principles, and the redemptive stories that come out of that is just incredible. I think there's a couple stats that I really love sharing the most. One is, we talk about you need economic, social, and spiritual capital to really flourish as an individual. I can know Jesus, but if I don't have any friends or money, theologically you may argue with me, but I don't think you're flourishing there. But if I have enough money to sustain myself, I have deep, authentic relationship, and I know and share Jesus, that's flourishing. And so when the average inmate leaves the prison, they've worked there long enough and have saved up enough money because they get real market wages. So they're not getting what a normal inmate would get working for the prison, getting cents on the hour. They're getting real market wages. And so they're actually able to save up money. So when they leave, up to $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 in their bank account, where you can actually, okay, now I'm back out on the outside. I've been inside for 10, 15, 20 years. So what do you do? Where do you start? Well, you at least have some economic capital to work with. You're not desperate.
Right.
So that's big. And that's a huge part of why the second stat is so fun to share. Most comparative recidivism rates, or the rate of which an inmate would return to prison after being released for additional crimes, it's all north of 70%.
Jeez.
Inmates
70%. 7 out of 10 go back again.
That's right.
Gosh.
Because they don't have any money. They don't have a lot of deep, authentic relationships. And most of them don't know Jesus.
That's terrible.
So what do? We're desperate. We go back to the only life we know how.
Yeah.
And it's comfortable enough. We go back to Egypt, right?
Yeah, right.
And so we can pick on them and say, oh, you went back to Egypt, but we do this all the time.
All the time, yeah.
Right? And so, but for those who worked at Seat King and come out, their recidivism rate is down to 7.5%.
Geez, 7.5%.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Again, good job, good friends, and they know Jesus.
Wow.
So they have purpose, they have a resume, and they have capital to begin working with. And so a lot of them, I think, I'd be careful not to overstate it, but I believe most of them, their HR function, they make sure they have a job when they leave. And a lot of times it's for the industry that they've already been working in, because you say, oh, Dan's available? We love the product that Dan's been working on. Yeah, right. We love to hire him.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. Great.
Yeah.
He's available.
That's good.
And so you have a pipeline of
marketable skill. Right. That's so good. One of the things I love about your story is that obviously in the difficulty in those early days, it is very easy, and I think a lot of people would do it, just to say, look, we're giving these guys a great income. I mean, that is it. Like, we're giving them a job. They're solving a problem for us. We're solving a problem for them. It's a transactional relationship, and let that be that. But it seems as if, your team, Enterprise Stewardship, it seems like Seat King, they've decided to say, look, we are actually going to invest in these people far more than just capital, just far more than just financial capital. And it feels like that has created the story.
Yeah.
And the fact that you guys have taken the time to break it down into different layers and make sure that people can understand it has been really cool.
It's, again, 20 years later, it's fun to talk about the success. Again, think long, act now.
10 years ago, maybe it wasn't such a sexy story.
Right. It certainly wasn't 20 years ago. And I think it's really a story of the unfolding understanding of what stewardship is. And again, it's way bigger than money. We think about money first when we hear that word, but it's way bigger than that. And they truly understand it. And then the compound impact that you have when you build into these folks is huge. But it started with a vision and a promise. They would do monthly all staff meetings. Okay. So they still do those today, and they talk about one of those principles: honor God, serve people, pursue excellence, steward capital.
Every month.
Yeah. They're hammering these things home. And so one month, it was not going as well, right? Because if all you're doing is focusing, we would say if all you do is focus on economic gains, then that's only going to lead to exploitation. If you focus on economic and social impact, then you'll be respectful. The people around you will respect you. The community will respect you. It'll be seen as good. But if you're able to focus on economic, social, and spiritual, that's where you become a blessing. And so there's real merit to that. But also, just real practically, okay, these are inmates in there in a maximum security prison. So if all you're working on is economic gains and you're exploiting them, that's a tough place to work. It's not, we celebrate how awesome it is to work in there now, but when they first got in there, it was like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
This is safe. And there's a lot of success stories, but there's also a lot of further complications or complexities that they have to deal with.
You're working with challenging people who have gone through traumatic situations.
You're working with challenging people, and as much as we love our government and bureaucracy, you're now subject to the rules
in a prison
of the prison.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
you have less autonomy even of some of the ways that you're able to operate everything. And
that's good. I was at the prison earlier this year, and one of the things that happened to that point is that people were sort of working and production was happening, and it was great. And all of a sudden, guards come running in, and they have to do this big sort of security check, not because of anything that the employees did, but somebody was missing in the entire prison.
That's
so
right.
They had to stop everything and check everybody. It took another 10, 15 minutes right out of the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And that's something that they'd be subject to because they were right there in the middle of the prison.
That's right.
That's good.
Yeah. It becomes a little more complicated, but starting with a vision and a promise. So Pete gets up in this monthly meeting. He says, I have a vision for us. We're going to be the best prison in the United States of America. And he's met with laughter, boos, sneers, whatever. There's no trust built up, and they just think, how can we have the best prison? It's an oxymoron. There's no good prisons in America. It's prison.
That's right.
It's not meant to be good. And he says, well, that's my vision. Here's my promise. I promise that I will do everything I can to invest in you guys to make you all that God has made you to be. And even that, it was not exactly meant with, oh, how sweet of you, and we believe you, and let's do this. And so it took some time. But like any good organization, you need some good early adopters. And so they had one, and a man named Louis, and Louis took it to heart. He started taking them up on some of the offerings that they were putting out there. Things like fathering classes, Financial Peace University, they were actually putting dollars and resources and saying, we will invest in you. And so we started taking that seriously. And while a promise made creates hope, a promise kept creates trust. And so he kept the promise. And so over time, they really bought into it. Louis was in there for life. And but he was so in on it that he ended up writing a long manifesto about what it means to be the best inmate in America. He's like, okay, if we're gonna have the best prison, we better have the best inmates. And so what is that gonna look like? And so today, he made it out. He lives in Hutchinson, right where the prison is. He has a tattoo parlor called Redemption Inc. And he creates awesome tattoos. He does some cover-ups, sorry. And he talks to people about the redemption story and how he now knows his purpose and who he lives for and his identity in Christ. And he gets to just continue to mobilize this idea of using your platform for purpose, for ministry, for the gospel.
So good. How contagious is that, right? Like he gets the idea, one of the first ones when he gets out, which is a kind of an unexpected, probably wasn't going to happen kind of thing. He starts his own business. That is awesome. I love that. So, the people who were in the room, they understood that. They got that clear nugget of what you were talking about. But there's people who weren't in the room. And for whatever reason, you didn't come to the Branches Summit. I don't know why you didn't. But if you weren't in the room and you're hearing about Mark for the first time, you're hearing about enterprise stewardship for the first time, you might be wondering, okay, what is this about? If you were going to give people who are watching and listening a clear sense of advice based on your talk, based on the work that you do, what would you say?
First thing I would say is you're not going to have a transformed business without a transformed leader. So are you a leader that's worth following? Are you a leader that's worth being given a transformed business to? We can look at the parable of the talents and say, our master gives us different levels of responsibility, and are we going to be the type of people that are worthy to take on a 10 talent type of responsibility? So that's number one. And number two would be as we look at how do we actually do it? What's the how? We love helping people figure that piece out. There's pretty predictable systems and principles that you can put in place to get the kind of results that you're looking for. But here's just to promote ourselves just a little bit. What I love about our systems is they're all driven out of principles. I'm probably the least system-oriented systems person out there. Like I don't love systems for system's sake. I like to carry things a lot in my head and, writing things down all the time in the mental checklist. And so when someone comes to me like, you need more systems, my immediate reaction is to say,
Do I though?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. That seems like more work to me.
Yeah.
But what I love about these systems is they're born out of principles. So when we look at purpose or how we lead or navigate an organization, we're looking at the principle of we're going to honor God. And if we're going to honor God, we better be people of character. And if we're people of character, that's going to result in these types of practices or systems that we create.
It's good.
In terms of strategy, we need to be able to pursue excellence. Okay. If we're going to pursue excellence, we better be people of competence. If we're people of competence, then that's naturally going to have some practices that we have in our organization. Culturally, all about people, we're going to have a principle of connection. And if we're, not connection, we're going to have a principle of serving people, which is going to create us to be people of connection, which is going to produce some practices or systems that we can implement to help us do that.
That's good.
And then on the cash side, right? If we're going to pursue the principle of stewarding capital, then we got to be committed. We got to understand this is not mine; it belongs to God, and so that's our relationship with it. And we're going to be generous, and then that produces some practices or systems. And so we can get hung up on so many of the, well, what are the systems and how do I do A, B, and C? And we get there, but we spend just as much time making sure, are we embodying the principles of, are we honoring God? Are we serving people? Are we pursuing excellence? And are we going to steward capital? And if we're committed to those four things, then the system piece, the practices, the how-tos become way easier than I think we'd realize.
Not just systems for system's sake, but it's driving somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah. What I love about what you're doing, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is that you're not just saying, hey, lead a redemptive business. What you're saying is, here's how it's done, and giving people both systems, but then also a dashboard. Yeah. Here's how you measure your progress over time, over a long period of time, to tell you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So, well, Mark, thanks for your time.
Yeah,
you did a great job on the summit stage for the very first time.
Yep.
Thanks for working with the Branches Institute for this whole year. It's been a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll catch you on the stage again.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.